Ratburger by David Walliams, Chapter 20, Tug of War. Of course, Zoe had always known that the bully lived somewhere in her block of flats. Her gang permanently occupied the adventure playground. What's more, every day Tina spat on Zoe's head from a stairwell, but Zoe had no idea the horrible girl lived this close. Then Zoe had a thought that made her feel confused. This meant it was Tina's family who shouted and argued and slammed doors even more than hers. It was Tina who got screamed at by her dad, and whom Zoe felt sorry for as she lay trying to get to sleep at night. Zoe shook her head to get rid of this strange new sensation of feeling sorry for Tina Trotz. Then she reminded herself of another sensation, flob on her face, and stopped. It was now mid-morning. Zoe had been scratching away at the wall all through the night. On the other side of the hall was Tina's big ugly face snoring. She was lying in her bed, which, as if in a mirror image, was placed in exactly the same place as in Zoe's room. The room was bare of possessions, though. It looked more like a prison cell than a girl's bedroom. Tina was wrapped up in her grubby duvet. For a young girl, she snored like a camel, loud and low. Her lips wobbled when she exhaled. It was a school day and Tina should be in lessons by now, but Zoe knew that most days she bunked off, and when she didn't, she came and went as she pleased. Now Zoe was face to face with her worst enemy. There was no turning back. Everything in Zoe's room was covered in a thick dust as a result of her excavations. As soon as her stepmother opened the door and came in to check on her, it would be game over. She would never ever see Armitage again. Right now, though, Tina's big scary face was right on the other side of the hole. Zoe peered at the bully's surprisingly thick nostril hair, wondering what on earth to do next. Suddenly Zoe thought of a plan. If only she could grab a corner of Tina's duvet, she could tug it sharply through the hole. Then, as Tina rolled onto the floor, Zoe could climb through the hole, jump over, and bolt out through Tina's flat to safety. It now occurred to her, though, that she should revise the chances of death for the digging plan to high. At that moment, she heard her stepmother's footsteps thundering down the corridor. Zoe had to act, and fast. She reached her hand through the hole, took a deep breath, and tugged as hard as she could on the duvet, which was rather greasy to the touch. It was as if it had never been washed. The yank was hard enough to send Tila rolling onto the floor, thud, thud, thud. Just as Zoe heard the key turning in her bedroom door, she clambered through the hole. Unlike a rat, though, Zoe didn't have whiskers, and even though she was an unusually small girl, she had rather underestimated her size. When her body was halfway through the hole, she became completely and utterly stuck. Try as she might to wriggle, she couldn't move an inch. Tina had now, of course, woken up, and it would be an understatement to say that she did not look in a good mood. She was angrier than a great white shark that had just been called a rude name. The bully rose slowly to her feet, looked at Zoe, and started pulling violently at the small girl's arms, doubtless so she could get her whole body through into the room and beat her up more thoroughly. "I am going to get you, you little runt!" she growled. "Oh, good morning, Tina," said Zoe, her tone imploring a non-violent response to this unusual situation. Meanwhile, no doubt hearing all the commotion, Sheila had rushed up to the bedroom behind her and grabbed hold of her stepdaughter's legs. The odious woman was pulling as hard as she could on them. "Come here, when I'll get my hands on you!" screamed the big lady. "Good morning, stepmother," called Zoe over her shoulder. Again the chirpy tone did nothing to pacify the woman holding on to her ankles. Soon Zoe was buffeting back and forward through the hole. "Oh!" she cried as she was pulled one way. "Ah!" she cried as she was pulled the other. Soon it was like she was singing a rather repetitive pop song. Ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah, ah, ah! Backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. Soon after that, the wall started crumbling around her as she was yanked back and forth. Tina was strong, but Zoe's stepmother had the weight on her side. It was a surprisingly even tug of war, which, as a result, felt like it would never end. Both were pulling so hard on Zoe's limbs that as she screamed, she was aware of one positive to the situation. Whoever won, Zoe would be at least taller by the end of it. She felt like a particularly prized Christmas cracker. However, just like a Christmas cracker, she was sure to explode. Larger bits of plaster were now crumbling off the wall and dropping onto her head. "Ah! Ah!" cried Zoe. A massive crack blasted across the wall. Crack! All of a sudden, Zoe could hear the whole wall giving away. Soon it came crashing down onto the floor in a blizzard of dust. Boom! The noise was deafening, and soon all Zoe could see was white.